Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in and listen well. The Tent Peg and the Throne, a tale of holy subversion. Everyone in the camp knew the arrangement. Heber had made his peace with King Jabin years ago, and the women nodded when they spoke of it, the way women nod when the matter has already been decided for them. A sensible household does not quarrel with 900 iron chariots. You smile at the soldiers when they pass. You trade fairly at the permitted hours, and you do not ask what happens in the valley below. If the Israelites down there lived under the heel of Sisera's army, well, that was regrettable, but it was not Heber's concern. The tents were well staked, the goats were fed, and the milk was warm each morning. Jael drove her pegs into hard ground every time the camp moved and pulled them out again when the season turned. Her hands were calloused from the mallet, her arms strong from years of repetition. She listened more than she spoke, and nobody thought anything of either. A woman with a hammer is simply a woman doing her chores. 20 years, Sisera had owned the roads. The farmers of Israel walked the long way around, through gullies and goat paths, because the main roads belonged to iron. Markets died. Villages emptied. Children grew up knowing nothing but the low metallic grinding of chariot wheels in the distance. That sound, which meant someone else owned the ground beneath your feet. And during all those 20 years, the men of Israel deliberated. The tribe of Reuben held long councils by their flocks, speaking gravely about patience and timing, while families lived under the shadow. Dan stayed near the coast. Asher sat comfortably by the sea. They had trade routes to protect, commerce to consider, arrangements of their own. Everyone had a very good reason for doing nothing. The reasons were always reasonable. That was the horror of it. Deborah sat under her palm tree and judged the people, because she was the only one who still spoke as though God was paying attention. When she summoned Barak and delivered God's command to gather 10,000 men and march to Mount Tabor, he looked at her as though she had suggested he swallow fire. "If you go with me, I will go," he said. "If you will not go with me, I will not go." This was not partnership. It was dependence, dressed in its best clothes. Deborah agreed, but she told him plainly, the glory of the kill would not be his. It would belong to a woman. Barak assumed she meant Deborah herself. He was wrong. God has a habit that makes the powerful uneasy. He does not answer iron with better iron. He does not send a general to defeat a general. He sends rain. On the day of battle, God threw Sisera's entire army into panic. The Hebrew word is the same one used at the Red Sea, when Pharaoh's chariots foundered and the waters closed. The Kishon River, swollen with sudden storm, turned the valley floor to mire. 900 iron chariots, the supreme military achievement of the age, sank like gravestones into wet earth. The machines that had terrorized a nation for 20 years became traps for the men inside them. The stars, Scripture says, fought from their courses against Sisera. Even creation had chosen a side. Sisera saw the collapse and ran. The commander of the mightiest army in Canaan abandoned his chariot and fled on foot, his dignity dissolving with every desperate stride. He ran toward the one place he believed was safe, the tents of Heber, the Kenite, where the arrangement with King Jabin still held. Surely the treaty would protect him. Arrangements always hold, until they do not. Jael came out to meet him at the entrance of the tent. This was unusual. A woman did not step out to greet a strange man uninvited. But she came forward and spoke with a voice as steady as a neighbor offering supper. "Come in, sir. Come in. Do not be afraid." He came in. She covered him with a heavy blanket, the thick kind that smells of wool and smoke and safety. He asked for water. She gave him milk instead, warm and rich, poured into a bowl fit for an honored guest. She exceeded every expectation of hospitality. Each gesture said the same quiet thing. "You are safe here." He drank, and the warmth pooled in his bones, and his eyelids grew heavy. The running was over. The blanket was soft. The milk was sweet. He slept. The tent was very quiet. Jael stood over him, and the full weight of the choice pressed down like a hand on her chest. Her husband's treaty, her household's safety, the risk that the commander might wake, that soldiers might come, that the arrangement would shatter like a clay jar dropped on stone. She was no fool. She understood all of it. But she had also seen the emptied roads. She had heard what the Israelite women whispered when they came to trade, stories told in low voices about what the Canaanite soldiers took when they entered a village. She knew what the comfortable arrangement actually cost, even if her own household had been spared the bill. Every accommodation with evil is a loan, and the interest compounds whether you count it or not. She picked up the hammer and the tent peg. Her hands knew the weight of both. She had driven 1,000 stakes into packed desert earth. The motion was as familiar as breathing. Position the point, raise the mallet, strike. She did not hesitate. She did not deliberate herself into paralysis. She drove the peg through his temple and into the ground, and the great commander of 900 iron chariots was pinned to the floor of a nomadic woman's tent, like a defeated banner staked into the dirt. When Barak arrived, still hunting his quarry with an army at his back, Jael met him at the door. "Come," she said, "and I will show you the man you are looking for." The general, who would not march without a prophet at his elbow, stood in the dim tent of a tent-maker's wife. Staring at the body of the enemy, he had been too hesitant to chase alone. The glory belonged to a woman, and not the woman anyone had expected. Far away, in a fine house with latticed windows, Sisera's mother peered out into the fading light. She waited for the sound of chariot wheels on the road. Her ladies reassured her. He must be dividing the spoil. Surely he is gathering dyed cloth, and a captive woman or two for every soldier. The spoil never came. The chariot never came. The silence at that window is the oldest verdict in the world. Upon every confidence built on the assumption that God has left the room. Scripture does not apologize for Jael. It blesses her. Most blessed among women, the Song of Deborah declares. And 1,000 years later, an angel will speak those same words to another unlikely woman in another humble place, chosen for another impossible deliverance. The pattern holds. God reaches past the credentialed, the armored, the impressive, and places the fate of nations in the calloused hands of someone the world would never have chosen. The tent peg is not a comfortable truth. It is a stake through the skull of a sleeping tyrant, driven by a woman who decided that the moment demanded action and not another council meeting of the soul. It is a domestic tool made sacred by divine purpose, an ordinary instrument that toppled a regime, because the hand that swung it feared God more than it feared the arrangement. Her hands were the only hands available, and she used them. And here is the question the text presses into your ribs. When the decisive moment arrives, and it will arrive, will you act, or will you deliberate and accommodate and make your peace with iron chariots and call your caution wisdom? Jael did not convene a council. She picked up a hammer, and 40 years of peace grew from that single, irreversible blow, struck in a quiet tent by a woman whose hands were calloused not from swords, but from stakes. Selah.